Today we're back in the book of Proverbs, and it's been a long time since we've been here, so I think it's a good idea to go online and refresh yourself on the 5-step process for reading the Proverbs. We're going to break each day up into contrast, counsel, challenge, Christ, and call. And just to remind us of the context leading up to Proverbs 10, Proverbs chapters 1 through 9 is an introduction to the book. And in it, Solomon is trying to persuade his son to choose the right woman to marry. And he knows he'll have 2 women vying for his attention, Lady Folly and Lady Wisdom. And by the time he finishes with Proverbs 9, the hope is that his son will be totally on board with marrying Lady Wisdom and rejecting Lady Folly, so that once he's in relationship with her, he'll be ready and he'll want to live out the wisdom shared in the rest of the book of Proverbs from chapter 10 on. And the great thing about personifying wisdom is that it shows us when the son lives out the Proverbs in the rest of this book. It's not to earn a relationship with Lady Wisdom, it's because he's already in relationship with her, and now he lives these out as the fruit of being in a relationship with her. And in the past, we've compared Lady Wisdom to Jesus because he's the ultimate embodiment of wisdom. And so when we come to the Proverbs, it may be tempting to read these as a list of rules that we need to keep in order to be right with Christ and earn our place in heaven. But instead, we should see actually we're in a relationship with Christ, and therefore we live these Proverbs out because he is the one to whom we have given our hearts. And this is how we should live as the fruit of our relationship with him. And this will be a real challenge for me with daily Bible reading because the style of the Proverbs changes starting in chapter 10. In Proverbs 1 through 9, it was more like a flowing discourse. But once we reach chapter 10, we come to these short, pithy statements. So my plan will be to try to find some overarching theme or themes that tie the verses together and focus on that. And for verses 1 through 15 today, there are 2 main contrasts made. One is between the wise and the foolish, and the other is between the righteous and the wicked. And more specifically, there's a contrast between people who do what's hard because it's the right thing and those who do the easy thing because they're too lazy or cowardly or corrupt to do what's right. And the counsel here is that sinful shortcuts in life only cut our lives short. In verses 2 through 5, he talks about someone who tries to make money in sneaky, sinful, underhanded ways instead of trusting in the Lord to take care of him. And instead of working hard, he just wants the get-rich-quick scheme. He wants to take a shortcut because he's lazy and he doesn't want to do the hard things. And in verses 6 through 14, he warns us about people who, instead of being righteous and people of integrity, they conceal their evil motives in their heart, and they use words to hide who they really are. Because again, it's much harder to actually be a person of integrity than it is to pretend to be one and to fool other people around you. In verse 10, the phrase, "he who winks the eye," is about a sneaky person who's hiding his motives. And instead of actually doing what's hard and listening to wise counsel, in verse 8, he's just a babbling fool who's only interested in sharing his own opinions. Because it's hard and takes time and it's uncomfortable to listen to people who are correcting us or who have a different point of view. And in fact, in verse 13, not only does he not listen, but words don't do him any good. The only thing that works, according to verse 13, is for life to smack him upside the head. This is a person who's always looking for the easy way out in life. He wants easy money. He wants easy relationships where everybody listens to him and he doesn't have to listen to anyone else. And he wants people to do whatever he wants. So he schemes and manipulates people and hides his evil intent. In fact, he wants easy conflict resolution. In verse 12, instead of forgiving people who sin against him, he snaps and flies off the handle in hatred because again, that's easier than humbling oneself and doing the hard work of forgiveness and reconciliation. situation. Now, he finishes in verse 15 with an acknowledgement that it's a good thing to be rich. It can actually be very helpful to you in life. And actually, if you're poor, it can cause a lot of problems. So he's not saying that money is a bad thing, but he is warning us against taking sinful shortcuts to get money instead of rolling up our sleeves and doing the long and arduous work to earn it. And you notice he started with money in verses 2 through 5, and then he comes back around to money again in verse 15. And this is how the Proverbs work, because when parents are teaching their kids, usually they don't sit down and tell them everything at once in a perfectly linear fashion. Usually it's based on what comes up that day in that child's life. And so the parent gives them an instruction, and then some other event happens and they give an instruction. And sometimes the child isn't getting an earlier lesson, so you've got to repeat what you said before, but maybe in a different way. And that's kind of how Proverbs works. And so the challenge for us today is to realize just because something is easy doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes we do things in the name of efficiency that's actually just laziness or cowardice or impatience. And there's just a general rule of life that the best ways are often the hardest ways. And so, for instance, if I'm afraid to have a conflict with someone, maybe I send them a text because that's just easier and it's a shortcut to get around the discomfort of a face-to-face confrontation. But in reality, it only makes things worse for me because that person misunderstands my text because they can't read my tone of voice or see my facial expressions. And so what I thought was a shortcut to make things easier only makes things worse. And we could add to this list things like cheating on our homework in school or putting all our money in an investment we've been guaranteed will 10x our money, or just appeasing our spouse and telling them we're fine when we're really not because we just don't want to deal with the conflict. Sinful shortcuts in life only cut our life short. And this should remind us of Christ in a couple of ways. Number one, when Jesus was in the wilderness being tempted at the start of his ministry, and Satan offered him right now to give him all the kingdoms of the world, he was offering Jesus a shortcut. Now, Satan didn't know he was tempting Jesus not to go to the cross because Satan didn't know Jesus was going to the cross. But from Jesus's perspective, wow, you mean I can have the kingdom right now and I don't have to be crowned king by a crown of thorns? But he rejected the shortcut, and instead he did the long, arduous, torturous work of trusting God and doing the hard thing that he came to do on the cross. And then he tells us in Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14, that we need to enter through the narrow gate because there are many who enter through the wide gate and it leads to their destruction. But the narrow gate is small and leads to life, and there are few who find it. Why? Because most people in life just want to take shortcuts. We just want to be efficient and do what's easy and go with the flow. But the narrow gate requires us to humble ourselves and to admit our sin and a need for a savior. And most people don't want to do that. And so they stick to their shortcuts in life, not realizing that it's going to cut their life short. If not now, then definitely in eternity. And so as we call on God for wisdom today, our prayer is, Father, give us the wisdom to know that most shortcuts in life simply don't work. Help us to be patient, to be diligent, and to trust in you to take care of us rather than taking things in our own hands in the name of efficiency and making everything worse. Help us trust that slow, steady, and faithful wins the race.